Azure Certifications, the piece of paper from Microsoft that tells the universe that you are now an Azure expert.
Lars, hold on. There's a bit more to it than that.
Yeah, alright, there is. In fact, Azure Certifications is a soup of numbers, made-up words, and obscure paths. However, they are a great tool when used the right way and you understand how they work.
That's right, but I hear Azure certifications can be really confusing to find your way around.
Yep, they can. But that is what I'm about to put a stop to. No, really. I will lay out the path to follow for each of the 6 common Azure roles and will ensure you have the best tools for your Azure journey. This includes the sequence of certifications to study for a particular role, as well as tips on studies, exams, level ups, and optional paths.
All right, I'll bite.
Excellent. Let's get started. And I'll start with the confusion that is Azure certification. Oh boy, where to start? There is an AZ100 exam, so that sounds like the entry level. Nope, the fundamental exam is AZ900. Obvious, right? And then after AZ900, you'd probably do AZ100. Oh, which by the way is now AZ104. And then you'll be forgiven for thinking that AZ120 is then next, but that is a specialty course that is for a specific audience using SAP. Once you've done AZ104, you can then probably move to, onto either AZ303, but AZ500 usually comes before. God, it's ridiculous.
Okay, calm down, Lars. It's going to be all right.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me explain how to make sense of all of this then. Although, if you're already familiar with Azure exam categories and want to skip straight to a specific learning path recommendation, you can find the timestamps listed in the description below. Now let me start with the exam categories, which is understanding what all those numbers mean, and also the 100 level is not the first step. In addition, each certification also has from 1 to 3 stars, indicating the difficulty of the cert. The level will be indicated on the learning paths later in this video. Now the way to read Azure certification exams and understand where they fit has two parts. Let's take AZ104 as an example. First, the letters of the exam, in this case AZ, refers to the general area of Azure. AZ is Azure in general. Exam starting with DP has to do with data, AI is artificial intelligence, and so on. The numbers after the area code, is this a phone number? Anyway, refers to the discipline within that area, and you have to look only at the first number. So AZ1 series refer to the system administration type exams. AZ2 series has to do with development, and so on. It's not a gradual increase in difficulty, a way to progress through the exams or anything like that. Think of it as train lines. Each take you to a different destination. Now, with that in mind, here are the current Azure exams, which I'll go through area by area and discipline by discipline. And remember, this is just a run through of what the categories of exams are. This is not a list of progression for you to follow. That would just be crazy talk. And we don't do crazy at ACG. Much. AZ1XX. This is for system administrator content, any Azure services, features, and concepts that relate to storage, virtual machines, virtual networks, and identity management falls in this category, as well as other infrastructure as a service products. You need to understand how to manage alerts, analyze log files, create policies, and any of the standard tasks commonly found in a day's work for a system administrator. AZ2XX is where developers call home. If you write code for a living and or are looking for a career in building applications, this is where your certifications live. You need to be on top of Azure Platform as a Service offerings, using storage for development integration, security concepts, third-party integrations, and troubleshooting. If you're looking towards cloud architecture, then AZ3XX is your bag. Building on existing cloud skills, solution architects implements robust environments, manage data platforms, monitor entire cloud solutions, evaluate security risks, and has the overall responsibility for the applications a company will have. It is an experienced category and not something you just kind of jump into. Now, I'll keep the numbers incrementing in a nice manner for now and go to AZ4XX. This is for DevOps related exams. DevOps covers concepts like site reliability engineering, SRE, security and compliance, source control, deployment of code, continuous integration, and much more actually. This is a large area to cover. Making sense so far? You can see how the numbering isn't sort of indicating any relation between the exams, but rather categories of topics and content. Okay, let's continue. AZ5XX is all about security in Azure. This covers how to secure your data and applications using databases in the best way, storing secrets and service credentials securely, managing user access, and protecting your Azure infrastructure in general. As I will get to a bit later, security is a concept and skill that almost any cloud role needs to be across. You have to be aware of what the risks and vulnerabilities are no matter what area of the cloud you work with. So that is AZ 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 covered. Guess what is next? Nope, it's AZ9XX, because Microsoft. And AZ9XX refers to the fundamentals of Azure. Don't look so baffled. Of course 900 is the entry-level exam. Now I understand the confusion, but as you will see, at least 900 is always fundamentals. I'll take that win. Anyway, AZ9XX covers almost all of Azure at a very basic level. This category is for exams where the learner has no or very little knowledge of Azure and cloud computing. And then we get to the more specific exam categories. I will start with the DP-XXX exams, which are all about data. Data is a huge part of cloud computing, as anything you do involves data. You can't have a business application that doesn't handle data in some way. As we just covered, AZ9XX, the equivalent data fundamentals category is DP9XX. This category covers data concepts on Azure relational data, non-relational data, analytics, and other core Azure data knowledge. DP1XX is for data science, such as machine learning and data models. DP2XX is where data engineers find their bite-sized snacks, such as data processing and data storage solutions. DP3XX is the home for database administrators that makes sure your data is stored correctly. And finally, I get to the last category I will cover in this video, AI, which covers, well, AI, or artificial intelligence. There's a fundamental category called AI 900, yay for consistency, and a single AI 1XX category, which is all about designing and implementing AI solutions in Azure. By now, you have hopefully got a sense for how exams and certificates are structured when it comes to the naming and numbering. You might also have noticed that there is quite a bit of overlap. Everything in the cloud is connected to each other. That is both a challenge and a blessing, as you get tightly integrated services that you can get a ton of value from, but you also then have to know how to use them. Now finally, we're talking about cloud computing here, a field that is moving at an incredible speed in terms of innovations, usage, and adoption. Things evolve, including the relevant certifications and exams. Azure's approach to overhauling the exam is to update the numbers. We started off with AZ100, and that has become AZ103, which has then become AZ104. As with any rule, there are exceptions. For Azure certification, these are specialty categories or exams. Currently, there are two specific exams that don't really fit in with the categories that I just covered. AZ120 and 120 does sit within the AZ1XX category and could definitely be considered a system administrator certification, but it focuses entirely on SAP workloads. AZ220 also fits within the AZ2XX category of developer certifications, but it focuses specifically on Internet of Things or IoT. These two exams are niche and don't fit in any sort of general path. There will be more of these, most likely, and they will cover similar niche topics and roles. You now have a sense of how Azure certifications work when it comes to topics, numbering, and coverage. However, part of what we do at ACG is not only prepare you for an exam and achieving certification, but also prepare you for the real world of cloud computing and working in the industry. It isn't enough to just have a certificate to land a job, but it can be a big advantage and step in the right direction. Now, once you understand that, the question is, which exam should you start with? Which should you do next? And how does it all sort of fit together? So let's take a look at the 6 main roles we'll cover today: Developer, Data, DevOps, Architect, Security, and finally, Artificial Intelligence. Now, before I get into it though, let's just clarify the role of AZ900 Azure Fundamentals. This is the very first certification if you have no experience or knowledge of Azure. It is the first for any role. With that assumption, I'll give my opinion on the minimum path required for each role so that you can get the foundation as well as perform in that actual role. Now, Microsoft has their Microsoft certification pathway, which is the minimum path to achieve a particular certification. While this follows the Microsoft rules and will get you a certification for sure, in my opinion, it does not prepare you for the role. That's why in this video, I will focus on the ACG role pathway. I will let you know what Microsoft says is the minimum, but my focus is to prepare you for the real world as much as I possibly can. Hence, the role pathway. Make sense? Okay, so hold on to your socks. Yeah, hold on to those and follow me as I go through the 6 main roles the certifications can help you master. I'm a developer myself and I have some idea of what I need to do my job. The first role will take a bit to go through, so bear with me. First, let's get the Microsoft path out of the way. It's AZ900 Azure Fundamentals and then AZ204 Associate Developer. That's it. Once you have the knowledge from AZ900, there are actually 2 ways that you can go. The obvious path goes to AZ204, which is the Associate Developer certification. And if you want to be a cloud developer using the Azure platform, it seems obvious to go that way. However, there is value in doing AZ104, the Associate Administrator certificate, first. 104 gives you a ton of knowledge around fundamental concepts such as virtual networks, storage, identity management, and more that you will definitely need as a developer. That's my suggestion. Do 104 and then 204 to give you the best foundation. Now, with that sorted, the path becomes a bit more straightforward. You might have thought AZ204 was the end of the developer path, but to get the most out of Azure and the best cloud toolbox for you, there's still more to do. Security is part of everything we do in cloud computing. I did mention that before. Seriously, it is important, which is why AZ500 is next. The Associate Security Engineer certificate builds on AZ104 and 204 to put security paradigms and procedures in context of development. That's important. And then I would suggest doing the AZ303 and 304 to get the cloud architecture knowledge as well. Now, these 2 exams are hard, probably the most difficult of all of the Azure exams. However, it indicates to potential employers that you take it seriously and you have the expert knowledge of Azure concepts. While AZ303 and 304 are 2 exams, they give you just 1 certification, Azure Solutions Architect Expert. If you're still hungry for more developer certification knowledge, get stuck into the world of DevOps and study for AZ400. Data is part of everything in the cloud. It is what makes a business have a product, informs strategic decisions, show progress, indicates how your Nicolas Cage painting sales are going, and much more. In fact, data is so important in Azure, Microsoft has given the topic its own letters, DP. Microsoft has 3 data paths that all start with DP900 Data Fundamentals. And then you do either DP100 for Data Scientist, DP203 for Data Engineering, or you do DP300 to be a Database Administrator. The ACG role pathway goes like this. After AZ900 Azure Fundamentals or equivalent, the best first step is to take the Data Specific Fundamental exam, DP900. This will give you a good foundation for what data in Azure means and how it is used. After DP900, do AZ104, Azure Administrator, before then going back into the data-specific exams. Now, 104 will give you that deeper level of understanding the very fundamental building blocks on Azure, such as storage, networking, compute, and identity. I can't stress enough how important it is to get this knowledge packed into your cloud toolbox. Back to data certifications. DP100 will take you through data science topics such as Azure Machine Learning, training data models, consuming those models, and much more. If you're more into data engineering, DP203 will ensure you can implement data storage, develop data processing, optimize data solutions, manage data security and compliance, and design data solutions. This is the largest of the data certification areas. Finally, if databases and administration of those is more your thing, DP300 is the right path. This certification makes sure that you can design efficient database queries, set up automation tasks, secure the database itself, optimize it, and much more. Now again, these three paths are parallel. DP100 doesn't necessarily come before DP300. You can do any of them first, or indeed not all three. Totally up to you. Okay, that was a lot of information for those two paths, developer and data. The next two will be a lot quicker. I promise. AZ400 DevOps Engineer Expert is the only exam that has Microsoft mandated exams you have to pass before you can sit it. Hence, the Microsoft certification pathway is either AZ900 Azure Fundamentals, AZ204 Developer Associate, then AZ400, or you do AZ900, AZ104 Azure Administrator Associate, and then AZ400. In other words, you can do the developer path or system administrator path before DevOps. In my opinion, that is selling yourself short and making AZ400 much harder to pass. Instead, as mentioned earlier, do AZ900 and AZ104 as a foundation. And once you have that foundational Azure knowledge, dive into AZ204 and get the developer side of the story. Doing AZ104 and 204 will give you the foundation for both operations and development. OpsDev, DevOps. Before you get stuck into AZ400 DevOps Engineer Expert, I do recommend doing AZ500 Azure Security Engineer Associate, as a large part of the DevOps world revolves around, security. Having AZ500 under your belt will further cement your skills using Azure services securely, and more importantly, identify when they aren't. Skills like securing data and applications and managing identity and access are also critical for a DevOps role. Now finally, finish off with AZ400 itself, which is one of the three expert level exams, the other two being AZ303 and AZ304. So happy DevOpsing! Being a solutions architect is not a first step in your career, nor should it be the first certification path you go for. It is often a more experienced role and other certifications come before it. In this case, I think Microsoft is being just a tiny bit optimistic, as their certification pathway states you can take AZ303 Azure Architect Technologies and AZ304 Azure Architect Design straight after AZ900. And that is just crazy talk, in my opinion. Also note that 303 and 304 are two exams, again, that counts towards a single certification, Azure Solutions Architect Expert. Now my take on it is that the architect path is a kind of different version of the developer path. The two have a lot in common. After AZ900, you can do either AZ104, Azure Administrator, or AZ204, Azure Developer, depending on your disposition to system administration or development. You can absolutely also do both, but it isn't required. You then do AZ500 to get the security stuff right, which is a very necessary part of being a cloud architect. Architecture that isn't secure is kinda useless and definitely will not get you any friends. Finally, complete AZ303 and 304 to get the full solution architect experience and be that expert level certified Azure professional. We've almost covered security already through architecture. First though, Microsoft states that you can do AZ500 Azure Security Technologies straight after AZ900, and that is a tall order. Instead, I have my AZG path for you. Security is much the same as architecture, in my opinion, as these two roles are very closely related. Only for security, I would say do both AZ104 Azure Administrator and AZ204 Azure Developer. Don't just choose one of them. So do 104, 204, 500, 303, and finally 304. It's almost like a song. Piece of cake, right? The last of the 6 roles that predominantly cover the Azure certification is artificial intelligence, or AI. This is a short path, but one that could expand in the future as AI becomes a standard part of business operations and strategy. Microsoft only has AI 900 Azure AI Fundamentals and then AI 102 designing and implementing an Azure AI solution as their path. Passing your AI 102 exam will certify you as an Azure AI Engineer Associate. To be fair, that isn't far off what I would recommend, but let me explain. After doing AZ 900, complete the AI-specific fundamental AI 900 certification. This builds on the AZ 900 content by drilling into specific machine learning principles, describing computer vision workloads, natural language processing, and other common AI types of operations. AI 102 is next on the list, where you get your hands on solution requirements for AI, as well as monitoring and implementing these solutions. Now, the level of this exam is very basic and not a ton of in-depth knowledge is needed, which is also why I would highly recommend completing AZ 104 Associate Administrator after AI 102 in order to get a much better foundation for Azure in general, which will make your AI solutions much more valuable and robust. Where does that leave you then? That's a lot of information to take in and a lot of potential paths to follow and decisions to make. If you know exactly which role to pursue, awesome! If not, then the best place to start is to study AZ 900 Azure Fundamentals and AZ 104 Microsoft Azure Administrator. These 2 certifications are the foundation for a larger part of any projects on Azure. And remember that while Microsoft says you can take pretty much any exam after AZ 900, with a few exceptions, I wouldn't, as the learning curve and jump from a foundational level to associate is often greater than at first glance. Follow the ACG role paths in this video will give you the very best preparation for working with Azure Cloud Computing. The exam. How do you prepare for it the best way? That is one of the most common questions I get. And the really useless answer is, well, it depends. However, it does. How do you learn best? What makes information stick in your head? We all learn in different ways, so this is a tough one to answer. At ACG, we pride ourselves on creating certification courses that are engaging, thorough, concise, and often entertaining. We have practice quizzes, practice exams, cheat sheets, forums to ask the instructors specific questions, blog posts explaining concepts in writing, webinars, and much more. We want you to succeed in the cloud computing industry, and part of that is passing certifications. We aim to give you as many online tools as possible to help both study for the exams as well as feel comfortable when you are in the room. Some general tips for studying are: schedule specific regular time to study. 2 hours or more per week is a good idea, as that keeps your momentum and sense of progression. It is important to feel you are achieving something every single week. Set a deadline for when you want to take the exam. Having a firm deadline will make you prioritize the exam and its importance. If you get distracted easily, have a dedicated space away from everything else to study. Reward yourself for completing a lesson, a chapter, the exam. Make it an occasion to complete another step. Yeah, have balloons. Find a study group online that you can join and share questions and ideas. This could be at your work or through the ACG forums. Now, the exam itself varies a lot depending on which one you're sitting. AZ 900 as an example is only 85 minutes and covers around 40 to 60 questions. It's a great way to get a sense for exams if you haven't done one before. The question types vary a lot. There are more than 40 types of questions as far as I know, but they change often to keep the content fresh. Some are multiple choice, some are scenario based, some are multiple true-false options in a row with no review. And the important thing is to know the concepts, services, and products in the exam area. There's no way to memorize a bunch of facts for the exam and then sort of hope to pass. You have to actually understand the material. So where do you think you will start with your Azure journey then? If you've never done any Azure work or content, start with AZ 900. Otherwise, have a look at the cheat sheet I've included with the video. Let me know in the comments or the ACG forum what your journey is like, and I will be happy to answer any certification questions that you might have. So see you soon on the ACG.